Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Findaway Productions with your co-host, Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. What's up, coaches? This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I am Daniel Chamberlain here with Kenny Simpson. Coach, how are things going in Arkansas?
Well, we're ready for the season to kind of get going hot, but it's kind of you can kind of feel when summer turns into more, it's not really fall because it's super hot, but I consider fall August just because football, and it changes. I'm always a little more happy, when that time comes around, school's getting ready to start, which most people that are teachers probably don't look forward to. But if you coach football, you do look forward to that because now it's about to hit.
Well, and your kids lose the excuse of like, I couldn't find a ride to practice today, right? Like, nah, I know you were at school, so let's go.
Right. Fresh start too. Everybody's undefeated. Everybody's kind of excited about the season and always a fun time.
Yeah, the game one jitters have always been with me, and I've only had 3 of them thus far, but and I may not even had them year one because I was so dumb about the coaching that I didn't even know what to be nervous about. You know what I mean? But yes, it's already set in. We've already got the butterflies. Have we got enough installed? Have we got enough done? Now let's just get out there and get that first kickoff out of the way, and we'll go from there, right?
Right. And then this year I got, to me, I've been a head coach for a while, but this is my first year actually on the varsity level with my kid playing. So now you have kind of the double jitters of I got to coach and not really worry about him, but you would like to see him do well,
How's it been in your first year, like installing him and having him be around? Do you find it steals attention from you during practice, or how does it work?
I try to just trust my other coaches to coach him. I think that I'm going to get on just like everybody else, but I'm not going to go out of my way to specifically watch just him.
Yeah.
And so fortunately for us, he's mainly a defensive player. And so we've got a real good staff back there that take care of him. I know he'll be coached up. And then he does work some offense for us. And so obviously in those roles, I'm a little more involved and then play some special teams. So we're fortunate to I try to kind of let other coaches handle him so that I can focus on what I need to. He's just a sophomore, so we get time.
That's awesome. All right. If you don't mind, share some ways that coaches can simplify football for their staff and their athletes.
Sure. Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions is the host of 3 major websites, including offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things offense from the full academy to the lifetime membership to books to templates to one-off courses, anything you want offense can be found at offensivecoordinatoracademy.com. It also is the host to defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, the same as the other, except all defense. So it's books, templates, worksheets. The new planners we have for defensive coordinators can be found over there, and the new defensive line academy. So if you want to coach defense, you're trying to catch up, you can find courses over there. You can find the full academy. You can find anything you really need specifically for defense at defensivecoordinatoracademy.com. And finally, the third website is fbcoachsimpson.com. All things football, from templates over practice schedules to call sheets to books. There's 32 books over there that range from scheme to general coaching to workbooks to planners. Anything you want coaching-wise can be found fbcoachsimpson.com. It also houses Headsets, the magazine. There are now 3 seasons worth of headsets over there, all free material. A lot of those were written by very well-known coaches. Tony Holler wrote a few of them for us. So whatever you want, whether it's special teams, offense, defense, line play, head coaching, you can find a lot of articles over there at Headsets magazine at fbcoachsimpson.com. Finally, if you want to find out more information about this specific podcast or other information that's coming out, you can register at fbcoachsimpson.com/podcast. Just put your email in there and we'll shoot you emails about new materials that are coming out or new guests we're going to have on the podcast or just kind of updates on what's going on.
Awesome. We're also sponsored by Adaptable Physical Therapy. It's Adaptable PT. That is a clinic that my wife and I have opened here in Grove, Oklahoma. It's Northeast Oklahoma. So if you're Northwest Arkansas, you're in the state of Oklahoma. You guys in Kansas and Missouri can probably drive down. I think you'd probably be within an hour, but she's an amazing therapist. She is certified in concussion. She's also certified in geriatrics. So maybe it's not your kids or your players worried about, but maybe your wife or your parents, whoever needs help, she's there to help you. She does practice PT 2.0, which basically is just there's going to be a squat rack involved in a lot of what you do. Okay. And we're talking about loading things, tendons, muscles, ligaments, and helping them get healthy again. It's one-on-one treatment every single time. You won't be passed off to another therapist. You will see Dr. Chamberlain or one of our employees every single time that you're in. So if your kids suffer concussion or knees, ankles, all the things that happen in football, feel free to drag them on down to Grove, Oklahoma and have Dr. Chamberlain take a look at them. It won't be me. I'm the podcaster. I talk and she does the treatment because she's way smarter than me. Also over at athleticspeedmovement.com. That is a thing that I'm a co-owner in, and we're looking to help you make your players fast. A lot of kids don't know how to run, and so they say you can't teach speed, but we tend to think that's wrong. The kids just don't know how to run. They don't know the physics of running, and once you get them there, I mean, we've seen some pretty significant increases in whatever you want to measure. If you want to do 10-yard flies, you want to do 40-meter dashes or 40-yard dash, whatever it is that you're measuring, we can get your kid faster in that thing. And I'm talking all of them. Your lineman, your quarterback, your running back, the one that's already really, really fast and taking home all the trophies, him too. Okay. We can make them all fast. And our motto is like, we want the grass to be long when you go on a away game, right? That other coach has said, we're not touching the grass after Monday because we know that they got some speed. So that'll be the indicator that you've made it right there, I think, when the grass is long when you show up to play an away game. That's over at athleticspeedandmovement.com. Moving on. So first question here. So the topic tonight is a kind of a crazy one because I feel like we've all been there. I don't know, Coach Simpson, I don't know if you've ever been there. I think you just keep moving on to do bigger and better things. I have suffered from this, so I have some personal experience in it. But that is why coaches get fired. And these are the real reasons, right? Wins and losses is going to be in here. If you lose too many games, you're going to go. But I've also seen coaches have 3 0-10 seasons and keep their job when they probably could have been out on wins and losses on year one, right? But you've always got to hope for better next year. But there's a ton of reasons coaches get fired, and we all know the elephant in the room is going to end up being politics, and we're going to talk about that too. But that's what we're on tonight. That's the one we're going to discuss. Coach, question number 1. So how do coaches fall out of favor?
Yeah, and like you mentioned, this is a difficult topic because, I mean, it's real, and that's what we want to handle over here on this podcast. But a lot of guys are hesitant to say certain things because, we all may need a job down the road and we want to make somebody mad. Fortunately, I don't care about that, and I don't know if Daniel does either. So we're just going to try to speak truth, but we're also not going to pour mouth admin because sometimes you get fired because you kind of deserve to get fired. And there are a lot of things at stake with that. And we're all in different situations. If you coach in Texas, it's a different world than if you're coaching somewhere else. I've been fortunate to travel. And so I've been to different states where the standard is different for what they're looking for in a coach. So
Right.
We're going to talk general things. My experience is mainly in the South. And so football is a little more of a high pressure area here. I know Daniel's in Oklahoma, probably the same boat there. So
Yes.
That's what we can speak from. If you're listening to us from a state where you don't really relate to a lot of this stuff, maybe we'll still touch on a topic or two for you. So question, I think, Daniel, it's fallen out of favor. There's a couple things that can do that. Number 1 is mainly not being able to connect with your community, like having issues within your community, having issues within a lot of times coaches move in they're not from there and they just go there. I want to coach football and that's all I want to do. And they neglect kind of the culture of what's around the school. And that's what I'm mainly talking about. So you go into an area, you might not even be from there. You just want to coach football. You're really good at coaching football, at least in your own mind, you are. And so you don't really make an effort, to know the restaurant owners or to know the local bank person or to know the parents of these kids or to know the community. Every school has a community, even if it's in a huge urban area, there's still kind of a school family or like a community that travels and supports the school, and they're all different. So I can't just give you a cookie cutter answer of these specific things, but you need to feel who that community is and make an effort to be part of that world. That's why a lot of coaches I know that will travel, they live in one town and they work in another. That's a huge issue. Like that's something they're really going to have to be intentional about is you don't even live in that community. And so that's going to be other issues you got to stack on top of that. But that's one really big thing that'll get you out of favor quickly is being viewed as either you think you're better than everybody else or you're not trying to be part of the community that you are. The second one I put on there, and that's the reality. Daniel already mentioned this, was losing. I don't know how to say it in a nice way, but if you lose more games than people think you ought to lose, and I don't know if you know this, but most parents are crazy, so we're going to kind of ignore them. And I am a parent, so I can say that. Mainly what I'm talking about is your admin. Your admin probably has certain expectations on what they think you can do. And a lot of times you can find that out during the interview process. Go ahead and ask, kind of what do you think would be a barometer of where you would expect us to be? Or a coach that just went 8-2 got fired, that's probably not a great job. Like especially if you get fired for performance and you move into that job, well, then that standard is way up here. So just understand that when you move in. Because like Daniel said, the standard for some school might be if you win 2 games, we're pretty happy. Or if you can make the playoffs, we're pretty happy. Or another school is state championship or bust. And so you need to kind of know what that barometer is when you go in. It's different everywhere.
And I really feel like that is it's going to be hard for some people to admit that like our team can't win at all. Some places have bad culture. They don't care if they win games. And so you can go in there, but the biggest thing is just number one, you hope the admin has a realistic view of what's going on. You're changing coaches, you're changing schemes most likely, right? Players are going to be flopped around. You're bringing a new staff. These are things that may or may not cost you a game or two, right? So that, oh man, 8-2. If you're firing an 8-2 coach, he better have done something really wrong and not performance based. But it happens. But hopefully they have a realistic expectation of what their ceiling is. But you need to find that ceiling, right? And you need to reach it. Reach it or exceed it. That should be your job every single year, whatever the ceiling is. Sorry, I stole your thunder. Go ahead, Coach.
No, you just did my thunder. That's what this discussion, so jump in there. But there's been some years I thought I've coached really, really well, and we won 4 games. And then the year we won 10 games, I might not have even coached as well. My first year as a head coach, I was coach of the, or second year as a head coach, I was coach of the year in Montgomery, Alabama. I know now that I'm a way better coach than I was back then. And so right. Sometimes as a coach, it's the situation you walk into, and so you got to kind of be aware of where that barometer is. And then you need to be aware that, hey, we did underachieve. What is a realistic expectation for you to win? And did you hit that? And unfortunately, that's part of the job. We signed up for it. And that's kind of what it is. And then I put the next one on here again was, we kind of mentioned already, not connecting with the community, but also not connecting with like your players. Your players need to want to play for you. That doesn't mean you have to be everybody's best friend, not at all. But you do need to figure out a way to relate to players so they want to be part of your program. You can do that a lot of ways. Like they can want to be part of your program because you're pushing them so hard that y'all are seeing success they've never saw before. I don't know what the word is there. They never had before. Okay. Or you could be that guy that's highly energetic that everybody just likes being around. There's a lot of ways you can accomplish this. Understand though, reality, if you're a hard-nosed guy, you better win more than the high energy guy. Like just kind of know that. I'm not saying that one's wrong or one's right, but if you're kind of a hard-nosed guy who's difficult to work for, you're not going to get the slack from the players and probably the community that the guy that everybody wants to hang around with, that he's going to get. So just be aware of that on the front end.
I have a brother who's rather hard-headed and very aggressive, but he's excellent at what he does. He works in the oil and gas industry, and he is if you call him in, you know the job's getting done right. And I tell him all the time, like, you have to keep that up because you can't be an a-hole and be bad at what you do.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna be an a-hole, you better be really good. If you're gonna be bad at what you do, you better be kissing tails, right? Because that's what it takes to stay at whatever position you have. Luckily, he's very, very good at what he does, so he can get away with being an a-hole every once in a while. But some points I want to add here to how do you fall out of favor, and that's lack of communication. I've suffered from this myself, and I feel like, especially coming from the military and working now with people who have none of that experience, communication is the number one lacking trait of coaches. And it's up and down the chain. So it might be because we're afraid to ask questions because we might look weak or we may look dumb or whatever your excuse is, right? So refusing to ask questions and running drills wrong. We got to week 3 a couple of years ago, and my D-line coach had been teaching my stunts. I was the DC, and he'd been teaching my stunts wrong, incorrectly, like out of order, different players going. So when I call it in a game because I see a thing, that's not what we're doing because the D-line's been taught wrong, right? So obviously that makes him fall out of favor with me as the DC because now my job's on the line. Also, being able to just go in and ask for, like, how am I doing? What were your expectations? Am I meeting them? How can I get better? What am I doing right? Okay, asking those questions. But then from the top down, answering that honestly is another place where we lack communication. I've been lucky the last year that, Coach Collins was very great. If I came in and said, what do you need from me? He'd say, here's what I need. Okay, what am I doing well? Here's the 3 things I think you're doing great. Don't change those. Pick these up. You'll be a great coach. Stepping on toes, which is the cool way of saying making other people look bad. Most of tonight's going to come out of my military history because that's what I have. That's my core, right? So coming from that world, when I see a vacancy, a void, a need, I fill it. I just go do the job. And I never in my life have thought that was a bad thing until I got into football coaching. And it wasn't until my second year that it really showed up because I finally had the courage. I knew what I was doing. And so I could step in and fill those voids. And it might be practice schedule looks like trash. And it's very hard to comprehend. And no one knows what's going on except the guy who wrote it, who happens to be the head coach, right? Or starting social media accounts when there aren't any for the school, promoting your players. Okay, these are things that I've just saw that needed to happen, and I just do them. I don't necessarily go ask permission. And then I take that complete package and I take it to the head coach and go, look, man, here's what I did. Here's the entire thing I made for you. And that doesn't always sit well. And I didn't know that coming in. Social media, when you're talking like reaching out to the public, yes, that made sense to me. But there's some things in-house that you're like, no one was doing this thing that needed to be done. I got it done. And now you're mad at me. Like, I didn't understand that until later when I realized it's just making people look bad. People do not want to be made to be embarrassed, especially not in front of their bosses, right? If they all of a sudden have this thing that was never done before and now it's done and you're the new guy on staff and their boss is like, hey, who did that? That can hurt you more than it helps you if you've not communicated. So it kind of ties back in the last one. And my last one is just being too brash with those around you. And once again, military wise, we are very direct. Don't use 5 words when 3 words will do. Get the point across, get off the radio kind of thing we work with, right? In the football world, it's not always that easy. I have found in my short amount of time in the profession that people want you to kind of beat around the bush because if you give them that option to solve the problem before you solve it, well, it kind of ties in the last 2 points. Like, it's not stepping on their toes or, it's good communication. To where once again, I just walk in a room and I have a solution and I'm going to tell you the solution to the problem before I tell you the problem because that's how I was raised. That's how I was brought up and that doesn't always fit well in this industry. I have been told that it looks belittling or intimidating, and to especially like newer coaches, that's not good, right? Because now you're breaking the mold of what they want. You're not the guy.
Well,
There's a million ways.
I don't want to jump because I don't know that specific situation, but as a head coach, these are just the things that you got to kind of be aware of. And I like that you're being honest here. So I think I wasn't involved in that. I don't know who the guy is. We'll keep
many guys along my path. So none of those are one person, luckily.
But I would say what a lot of head coaches will view that as, especially I would have at a young head coach, I would view you as a threat. Like, you are a threat to come take my job. You feel you can do better than me. And therefore, a lot of times I'll be very defensive not making that right or wrong,
Yeah.
but that's the fear.
Yep. I worked pretty good with my head coach this year and just told him, here's what I bring to the table. This is kind of things that I like to do. And he said, fill the void. It's yours. Make it yours. That's great. And we had a wonderful relationship, and that was great. So it goes back to communication. If you talk about it before you do it, it probably helps. If you bring someone a completed product, they're off, like you said, to feel threatened. So
Well, a lot of times you can, I think, like you said, I would love it if a guy would do that, but I'd probably want him to say, "Hey, coach, you think I can do this?" And I'd probably, "Yep, go do it." Because I don't, but a lot of times, and you're unique too, Daniel, because your background's different,
Yep.
but a lot of younger head coaches or coaches that maybe are new, and I was the same way. There's a threat by a guy who's ascending. So I'm gonna talk mainly my assistant coaches right here. Like I'm older now, so I don't care. But when you're the ascending assistant who's coming up, there can be some uneasy feelings there. So it needs to be overly communicated on both parties that one, I'm going to help you be a head coach. That's what you want. And I want to help you do that. And two, on the other end coming back there is the best way for you to do that is to make that coach successful. Because I know enough coaches have probably either been burned or seen it where they got rid of a coach to have to bring in a guy on his own staff.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest fear for a lot of guys that are sitting in that seat.
Yep. No, I 100% agree. And I've over the years, I think I've gotten better at this. It's hard to turn it off sometimes, but I mean, there's other coaches that have other issues like this out there, right? Like you just,
Yeah.
and the brutal honest part about this is there's bad coaches out there, right? There's bad teachers, there's bad coaches, there's bad people in every industry. Someone makes up the bottom 10% of every single industry alive, right? Like it's just how it works. To think that there's the perfect head coach at every job you can't do that. So you're right, it would be a threat, and maybe it's because you are better. I've talked about this in the past. It's just sometimes you're the guy who knows what's going on in a room full of guys who does not know what's going on, right? They don't know football. They got the job because they knew a guy, or they were the only person around when the job opened.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff happens. And I feel like that's where internally you have to understand. And I luckily have not ever been in that position where I was the smartest guy in the room. That's not ever been an issue for me. I've always had someone there to develop me, and that's been great. But like you're talking about, man, sometimes you're just a threat. All right, so moving on from how we fall out of favor, and so why does it go so quickly, Coach? Why do you go from we're talking about it? You can be the ascending assistant, and now all of a sudden you're the dude I got to get rid of. So what happens there?
Right. Well, there's a couple things. There's probably a lot more than I'm going to say, and I'm sure we're going to discuss a few more. But first one is a lot of times you don't have somebody who either you trust or trusts you enough to kind of warn you about what's coming. So like most people that might be kind of on the perimeter, when they're going to fire a coach, it's not like it's a big secret, except for to the head coach. So a lot of times that word is out there, or that we're struggling or they're unhappy with whatever's going on.
Right.
But if you don't have somebody either up or down the chain, so an admin you can go talk to and be honest with, or maybe even an assistant coach is underneath you that you can kind of look to as somebody who's there to help you, to say, hey, coach, we're really struggling with discipline. Somebody pointed out we had 2 kids get kicked out of whatever game, and we had this and that and whatever. Well, as a head coach, you just kind of lock yourself in the office and ignore a lot of that stuff because you got to focus on what's going forward. There's a building kind of resentment that if a coach doesn't catch quickly, and a lot of times they don't know about it, that builds very, very quickly. And if you don't kind of address it early on, sometimes it's too late by the time you get to it. So having someone that can kind of help you know that's coming is big. And then the other one I put down was, or the other two, I put down administrative issues. Like if you're having issues with budget, or you're having issues with your personal administration, like discipline, usually that would be it, or not monitoring something where some discipline issue happens where you were supposed to be in charge. If you're the head coach, it's going to come back to you. Even if you weren't supposed to be the one who was monitoring X, Y, or Z, you're the one responsible for it. So a lot of times it'll happen very quickly if you're not kind of on your P's and Q's of who's supposed to be where, who's monitoring the kids, how's our budget looking right here. What are we fundraising for? Just those little things. When you talk about money and you talk about discipline, those are two things other than wins and losses that will usually get you a whole lot quicker than anything else you might do. You could be the greatest communicator ever, but if you don't monitor and some kid gets hurt, you're probably screwed. And that's just understand that's coming. Or you are 40,000 over budget, or you buy things you're not supposed to buy. There's a lot of those things that if you're not on it, that will get you really, really quick. And then the last one I had down there was just kind of a lack of awareness, like kind of going back to the first section we talked about, not being plugged in enough to the community to understand what potential issues are on the horizon. There's a lot of coaches that are really talented that can put out fires before the fire is sprung. You kind of know this could be an issue. I'll give you just like a simple one. You know that you're going to start the sophomore quarterback over the senior. Well, the right thing to do as a coach is call the senior in and have that conversation up front with them. If you have to, even visit with the parents and kind of tell them, here's our plan for what we're doing with your son, and here's why we made that decision. You might not like it, but maybe I've tried to put this fire out before I just made some rash decision. There's thousands of other decisions you make as a coach that potentially could spring a fire somewhere. Or you went off on a kid at practice. It's probably worth calling your admin to say, hey, you may get a call from so-and-so's mom. Here's what happened from my perspective. Before that parent calls and says whatever, admin like to be kind of aware so they're not caught off guard too. A lot of times they'll kind of know, okay, and the call may never happen, but if it does happen, you've kind of got ahead of the problem.
And Coach, you bring up a great point there, and that's being able to admit when you're wrong, or at least start, because some coaches would say, oh, I'm not talking to admin. Why would I admit to a thing that I did when no one's asked about it yet, right? Like, if you're having to hide, even if you did, there's some bad stuff out there. But there's levels of this that we could get to that are terrible. Right. But in this case, like I went off on a kid, and maybe the kid didn't do anything wrong. I was having a bad day. I came into the office angry. The kid messed up a little bit, but I thought he messed up a lot, and I turned it up to a 10. It's hard to go talk to the admin and say, listen, I overreacted. You may or may not get a call. That's a hard conversation to have. And internally, that's hard to do, right? It's hard to admit that.
And when you have that conversation, you want to make sure they know what steps you've already taken to prevent. Like, here's what happened. Here's what I have done. I just want you to be aware.
Problem solving before I take the problem to you, I'm going to have the solution. That's kind of my thing, right? That's very big. So you kind of talked about why does it go so quickly, and I think that the social media is a big one right now, but social circles outside of your control or outside of your realm of understanding is huge. And I didn't know that till the last few years when you watch something happen at practice and it's not a big deal, but the old game of telephone starts. And by the time it gets to the 5th or 6th person, there's a Facebook post about how you should quit your job because Bobby Lee was mistreated at practice. And you're like, no, he wasn't, right? But you don't know about what all's going on. You don't know what's being said. There's just a lot of social circles out there that we don't know. You don't know. You just don't know they exist. And then all of a sudden they show up and it's you and your superintendent in an office having a conversation about whatever. And hopefully you've played your case, but maybe it wasn't even big enough to call your admin, right? There was nothing wrong, but by the time it got over there, it did. And that's where, you talked about building relationships with your admin earlier and communicating. They need to know where are you at? What's your level of character? Like, could this have actually happened without any communication beforehand, right?
Yeah, and we're not, the goal of this podcast was not to just bash admin, but the reality is sometimes there's people out there that they're just going for you. And then sometimes you could do nothing wrong and lose your job. I don't know if y'all know this, but that's just kind of the way the world works. We're trying to focus with this podcast more on things that you might have some control over.
Right. So last part here, this will end up being pretty short until we start telling our horror stories, I guess. So how do we avoid it, Coach? We've talked about the unknowns and the craziness that goes on. How do you avoid that kind of stuff?
Well, you got to connect. And so creating kind of an environment where the community feels welcome and that you are appreciating them will go a long way. So we do a lot of different things. I'm sure everybody kind of does a community pep rally, but if you don't, starting that and personally going out and inviting all these local businesses to come to your field and kind of represent themselves as good. We try to do theme nights to try to bring out community members to our games. You'd be surprised how much giving out hats and shirts would do to locals vendor, like local business owners, give them tickets to the game. I mean, just kind of reaching out to people that, are in your community. Those are easy things to do. Being available, being available to meet with whoever needs to be met with. And a lot of times that can be difficult depending on what your other job might be. For me, I'm at the school all day, so that's a little easier where I can go meet with a teacher or go meet with whoever. So you've got to be connected kind of in that world. We haven't even talked about teachers, but you could throw that one in there as well, as you've got to be connected with teachers where they see you as somebody on the same team as them. It drives me insane when I hear one of your football boys, yada, 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 like that. But I'm never going to go off on a teacher about that. Like I think I don't go say one of your math kids did this, that's not how that works. But like it or not, especially if you're in the South, you're a football coach. Everybody, whether they want to admit it or not, recognizes you have more sway in students' lives probably than a normal teacher because you're with them more. And right. So they understand you can reach them more. So because of that, those teachers need to kind of feel like we're in this together. Like we're both trying to help Johnny get to graduation and get a job and get through. And that doesn't happen when the only time you visit with that teacher is when Johnny has bad grades and you need a favor from him. And so,
yes,
you got to be careful kind of on that end. So we talk about community, but teachers as well there. Other ways you can avoid it, pretty simple, win. I mean, I hate to say this, but if you win, the winning will cover a lot of stench, and which it shouldn't. I don't think it should. I think that's not right, but it is real.
Right.
You win a lot of games, you could probably get away with a little bit more. And I don't think that's right, but it just kind of is what it is. Or taking over a program where maybe it was a lower bar and you took them to a higher bar. That's also, if you're a head coach, kind of side note here, that's the time you want to go ask for stuff you need for your program. So those years you had a really good year, okay, we need turf. Or those years you had a really good year, we need this. Those are the years you go. You don't go do that after you had a bad year. So don't, just kind of heads up on that. Then I'd say creating an atmosphere that the kids want to be a part of. I think that the time of being a drill sergeant coach is probably come and gone. If you are that guy, hire guys that are not that guy. It's like if you're kind of a hard-nosed guy, try to hire guys that are going to be able to relate to kids really well. If you relate to kids really well, then maybe you can hire that one guy who can kind of fill that role. There is a valuable need in pushing kids to be excellent. I'm not suggesting you don't push kids. I am suggesting trying to make it an atmosphere where kids want to be part of. And so a lot of times you're dealing with one, I don't know what state you're in, but kids can transfer schools now, it seems like left and right. You're dealing with kids that can go play basketball year round or go play baseball year round or go play Xbox year round if they want to. So you're competing now more than ever to keep your kids where you where 20 years ago, the kid went to that school, and if they wanted to play football, they did what you said they were going to do.
Yeah.
And that's not how it is anymore. So you need to figure out how to adapt to that and make your environment a place kids want to be part of. I'm not saying to go be fake or go do crazy things, but I am saying figure out a way to relate to these kids, or you are going to have not very many kids playing.
So I have a couple points here. Number one is just building relationships. I think the world runs on relationships. If you talk about even getting a job, it's who you know, not what you know. The entire world runs on relationships, and that doesn't stop with football, right? And superiors, your peers, your subordinates, the players, build relationships. Because if I'm going in and having a conversation with my superintendent every week, just hey, here's a heads up what's going on in football. This is kind of how we think we're going to handle this week. Maybe they think it's a waste of their 30 minutes to have a conversation with you, but probably they're going to go, man, I love a coach who just wants to be in tune with me and let me be in tune with what they're doing. The same with the principal, and it gives them a chance to spout off hey, Billy Bob ain't doing so good in science, right? You've noticed he's starting to fail some classes. Are we doing anything about that? Jared last week was he had to have some discipline. He had to have some detention. Did you know about that? What are you doing to resolve that? Give them a chance to kind of come back. Same with the teachers. Coach, you threw teachers out there a minute ago. There's nothing wrong with going and have a conversation with the teacher, every morning. What else do you do? I mean, a lot of us are teaching, but everyone has a plan period. Everyone has a lunch. Go over and talk to those guys, build relationships. And that way, when the tough stuff hits, they know who you are as a person. They've talked with you. They've seen what you're doing on problem solving. And hey, this one slipped under the radar.
Right. And I would say as a football coach too, I think that your attendance at events goes a long way. We have kids now that play, so it makes it easier. But when they were little, we would still go watch at least one game of every sport. So right. I don't really enjoy baseball, but we'd go watch a baseball game. We'd go watch a softball game. We'd go watch a basketball game. We'd go watch a soccer game. We'd stick our head at the track meet. And then we'd get out of sports and we would go to the choir concert and we would go to the talent show. We would go to the art show. And when you do that, and that teacher, because that's their Super Bowl, like the art teacher, the art show, that's their Super Bowl. And when you're walking around there with your family and they go, oh, coach showed up to the art show, that goes a little bit of, hey, I care about you, not just what you can do for me.
Yep. My last point is something that I've really taken to heart, and that is extreme ownership. There's a book out there by Jocko Willink. He has a couple of really good books about leadership, but my favorite is extreme ownership. And that is, if you want to know what the book is about, everything is your fault. And the quicker you start making strings to the things that could go wrong and claiming them as your fault, you'll start problem solving for them. So Billy Bob is failing science. Why is he failing science? What didn't I do in my program to ensure all of my kids are passing science? Well, I didn't have study hall after practice. I didn't check grades once or twice a week. I didn't whatever. And then when you make that, institute it. Now we have a study hall. Now we have grade checks twice a week. Mm-hmm. And now that doesn't happen again. And so it wasn't your fault at all, but it is, right? And so that resolves a lot of that. And that goes with all the things we talked about. Parents, issues with boosters, lack of communication. The faster you say every single thing is my fault and I'm going to problem solve it, because likelihood is someone out there is not doing anything about it, right? It's just going to happen because no one's trying to stop it from happening. So if you're the guy that steps up and says, everything's my fault, I'm going to go out and solve it all, that's great. And people will pick up on it and other people will start doing the same thing you're doing. And now maybe that's not such a big deal. It builds right back into building relationships, right? Coach has actually got a study hall for kids with a C and below in any class. That's crazy. We've never had that, right? He loves the kids and he really understands that education is what we're here for first. And now you've got a great relationship or some camaraderie with those teachers, parents, administration, whatever. So,
yeah, and if you're hearing this and you're going, that sounds like a lot, that's because it is a lot. Welcome to being a head football coach. But what I would do, what Daniel said, so like we do have a coach that I have assigned to do that, because I can't do that and do this and do this and do that. You can't be everywhere at once. Right. And so a lot of y'all are probably hearing that going, well, we couldn't do that because I can't do all of that stuff. You're right. So find a coach you have on your staff that you trust who can do that one thing. And then find another coach on your staff who can help you with your community night. And find another coach on your staff who can help you with fill in the blank. And so that's where you learn how to delegate as a coach. Doesn't mean you have to specifically do all of these jobs. You are in charge, and Daniel mentioned it. You're the one the buck stops with, but use those guys on your staff to help you in some of these ways.
Coach Carter's a really good movie about, they had the grades thing happen and he canceled all the games and locked the gym. But more than that, what he really did was reach out to teachers and say, will you please help me get these kids back on track? And there's nothing wrong with that either. Go to the heads of those departments. If you're a big enough school, do you have department heads? And if not, just go to the teachers that you've made relationships with and be like, look, I don't know science. I need someone to tutor them that knows science. So can we either start a roster with other students that are doing really well with this, or teachers, someone who can come down and help us twice a week and get these kids back on track? Like there's other ways. And once again, your coach who's assigned can be the one that reaches out and does that. I just feel like that's a really good way to avoid a lot of these disasters. Extreme ownership has also kind of taken me in a place where, I have been let go from a job. I have been non-renewed. These are things that happen to coaches. And sometimes I feel like that's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. But that's one where you really go back and you go, okay, at the bare bones of this, what did I do wrong? Was it because I'm too brash? I lack tact? Is that what it is? Is that what causes it to happen? All those things we listed in the beginning, right? Is it losing ball games, issues with the community, whatever it is? How are all those my fault? How can I tie those strings back to myself, and how can I fix those in the future? Now, winning games, that might be the hard one because you may not have the Jimmies and Joes. It's always Jimmies and Joes. It's almost never X's and O's, but um, you could really just not have the talent. But you can resolve a lot of those things. All right, Coach. I think we've complained a lot, and maybe not enough. There's a million reasons out there, guys. Right? We politics is part of it. You're gonna make a parent angry who has enough pull in the system that you don't come back next year. You're gonna make a principal mad because you didn't do a thing correctly, and they're gonna cut you loose. Your head coach is gonna be upset because you're the smartest guy in the room. That's gonna happen, and he's gonna let you go because, like Kenny said, you're a threat, and he cannot have anyone there threatening his position. Those are gonna happen. All you can do is learn that lesson. When you move forward, you learn how to judge people and kind of figure out where you fit. Maybe you don't take the job. Maybe it's a job where you don't fit because you will get fired anyway, and you don't want that on your resume, right? So it's just kind of, that is part of being a coach. Unfortunately, that politics side of it happens. And it is the elephant in the room. It is the thing we don't want to say. It's the thing we don't want to talk about. When you're in your interview, you got to ask hard questions, right? At a recent one, I asked some people, what does success look like? And they didn't know. They couldn't tell me what success looked like in their program. And that was a red flag for me. Like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, you don't pay enough attention to the football program to know what you want it to look like? Or you've just never seen success. You don't know what that looks like, right? But they don't know their own ceilings.
Well, I've always, if I put in for a job or thought about putting in for a job, I'll call the former coach, and especially if he's guy who got fired. I mean, what's he going to lose? He'll tell you everything you might want to know.
Yeah.
And then you call coaches that played against that team. And so you dig up information from those who are going to be very willing to give you always the not good stuff.
Right.
Because the admin and where you're going to interview, they're going to give you all the good stuff. But if you want to find out the not good stuff, call the guy that just got fired and see what happened.
Yep, absolutely. All right, man. So let's move into everyone's favorite parts when we quit talking quite so much, and it's what not to do as a coach. Lessons learned. Everyone can benefit from these. Coach, could you let us know today's lesson?
Yeah. So today's lesson on what not to do as a coach is to start doing what you think other people want you to do instead of what you feel is right for the kids. A lot of times as a coach, we just mentioned politics. And so it's easy to get caught up in, man, if I do this, I might make this guy mad and that guy mad and that guy mad and that guy, and you might get fired. All that stuff might really happen. You're not like paranoid. It is real. It could happen.
Yes.
But I've always kind of just made the general mindset of, I want to be able to sleep at night knowing that I did this right by the kids. And so whenever we make a decision, that's kind of the filter or the lens that I look through is this good for our kids and for our team? So we start off with the individual kid. Is this good for this kid? And then we broaden out to, is this good for our team? Because sometimes, unfortunately, what's good for the team has to take precedence over what's good for the one kid. But most of the time, 95% of the time, you can make both those things work. Unfortunately, when you go through that lens, you're going to alienate some people. Like, is it best for the kids that we do X, Y, and Z? Yes. Do the coaches agree that we need to do this? No. Well, guess who wins? The kids win, because that's what's best for the kids. Is it best that we do this for the kids? Whatever it is, yes. Do the parents agree with that? No. What are we going to go with? What's good for the kids? And so, to me, it's not necessarily the best advice to keep you from getting fired, but it is the best advice, I think, to keep you from feeling you did the best you could to be good to who you were hired to be responsible for. Right. Unfortunately, most of our job sucks, not because of the kids. Like, that's the best part of everybody's job in coaching. It's always all that other stuff. And sometimes when we let that other stuff creep into our decisions, we poison the one thing we were trying to do, which was influence kids.
Yep. No, I 100% agree. And that's in probably more areas in life than coaching football, right? As we start doing what other people want to make them feel happy, and we quit doing what we know is right. That's, what do we call it? The hard right versus the easy wrong. It happens, and unfortunately, that I feel like that's become a trend. Is we're all doing the not necessarily wrong, but not the most right. And if you break out of that little, if you start walking against the crowd, you're going to catch some shoulders, right? You're going to get some elbows. You just kind of have to do what's right and understand your core values will lead you. All right, coach. So tonight, with no guest, I think it's time that we throw in another top 10. So the only way we can go here is top 10 ways to get fired. So I'll let you lead it off with your
Okay.
top 10 ways that coaches get fired. And I'm not sure if this is a 1 to 10 and like 1 is the worst way or 1 is the easiest way. So just throw them out whatever order you want, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so I'll do top 10. I'm gonna go in order. So I'm gonna go from 10 to 1, 1 being probably the most thing that's gonna get you fired, and 10 will still get you fired, but it's not quite as high on the priority list. So number 10 for me was ignoring your youth or B team level teams. I think that's something that's overlooked by a lot of coaches. I put it low on the list just because you may not have the ability to control that anyway, or you may be so talented it doesn't matter anyway. But if you're at a school that has B team level teams, youth level teams, and you completely ignore that, more than likely at some point that's going to come bite you in the rear end. You're going to lose kids. You're not going to have them developed for where you need them to be. So I put that number 10. Number 9, I put down poor relationship with coworkers in the school. Specifically, that would be like teachers, having a poor relationship with the staff and being looked at as he's only here to coach football and doesn't care about anything else. That's going to cause issues with students, with grades. We all kind of rely on each other. If you're not really well liked and a teacher has a chance to get a kid that might hurt you, I hope they wouldn't do that, but the reality is they might. So that's number 9. Number 8 was politics. And Daniel kind of mentioned lack of tact. Like there is a way to say what you want to say in a better way than you immediately think of. And sometimes as coaches, we just say, well, I just speak the truth. And that's a way of covering up. Like sometimes I'm blunt and mean, or there can be a better way of saying things like the sandwich method. Say something nice about whatever it is, say your hard truth, then compliment that person again. Understanding kind of how to phrase things, it matters as a coach. So I call that politics or lack of tact. Okay. Number 7, not understanding your job is more than just coaching football. And that could be like attending other games, teaching in the classroom, all these little things that come up about not just coaching. Like, how are you in the community on a Thursday night in the winter? What are you doing? Are you taking off and going fishing and you're not really paying attention to things? Or are you showing up, being where you're supposed to be? So number 6, micromanaging. So we're kind of getting a little more hardcore here. Micromanaging, trying to do everybody's job. You're going to run off your staff real quickly. You're never going to be happy. And you're never going to get everything done because one person can't do it all. And so micromanaging is number 6. Number 5, not developing a strong coaching staff. Kind of getting back to what Daniel mentioned when we started off, that could be because you have fear that if you make them strong, they might be stronger than you. And so that should be the goal of every coach, but unfortunately, it's not always that way. So sometimes we don't develop a staff, and sometimes we go out and intentionally pick a weaker candidate than a stronger candidate for a job because we don't want to be threatened by what they're going to do. But having a strong staff is going to be key to a team being successful. Number 4, I think it's a big one. A lot of coaches, we pay lip service to, but do we really do it? And so I put down 4, using players for what they do for you, but not serving them. And if you want to figure out if you're that guy or not that guy, it's really easy. When your players graduate, how many of them come back and talk to you? How many of them do you still have a relationship with? How many kids have you done things for that aren't very good? And so ask those hard questions to yourself. If your answer is no one ever comes and talks to me if they graduate, they're done, or the players that stink never talk to me, well, then the vibe you're sending, whether it's true or not, is I care for you for what you can do for me, not what I can help you do. So that was number 4, could have been number 1. Number 3, I put losing games. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's pretty high on the list because if you live in the South, that's just kind of where it is. Number 2, lack of supervision or organization. You can have a great career, be great, and you're not organized, the wrong moment, the wrong kid gets hurt, you're gone. So understanding supervision, organization, that's extremely important no matter how good a person you are. You got to make sure you're doing that stuff, especially in today's society where everybody's trying to sue everybody and no one wants responsibility. It's always going to fall on you. Okay. And then the last one, number one, and it's probably Daniel's number one too, just hearing him talk, lack of communication. Lack of communication with your superiors, lack of communication with your parents, lack of communication with your players, lack of communication with your coaches, all of that stuff. Are you over communicating? And there's no such thing as over communicating. So are you communicating more than you even think you need to? So that was my top 10 list. Daniel, I bet we have a couple in the same. I'm curious what you have different.
I'm quite sure that they're very similar. I will say lack of communication is not my number one, but is directly tied to basically all of mine. So that's great.
Right.
Number 10, I've got favoritism. And luckily, Twitter coach, football coach, how do I say this correct? Football coach Twitter is taking a stand in the last couple months about favoritism. And it is a lot about, we all do have a bias. The kid who never misses a practice, who works his tail off, who doesn't skip a rep in the weight room, who his grades are A's, he's never a liability ever to us. We like him, right? And I'm going to get him on the field as much as possible because he's doing everything right. The kid who can't pass a drug test, regardless of how talented, I can't make him the quarterback of my team because he may not play for 2 weeks, right? When he has a hot drug test, he's out for a minimum of 2 weeks. So, and that's if you just have very common coaching morals and you don't punish any more than that. Favoritism exists. However, I think that it's warranted in the fact that we want kids who are doing the right thing all the time. Hopefully your favoritism isn't the most athletic kid on the team is my favorite and he's going to do whatever he wants and get away with murder, because that's bad. But I think favoritism, whether it's warranted or not, will get you fired. Number 9, no development of players, coaches, and program. And all three are very, very unique, and all three are very important. If your coaches are never getting better, if they can never take your job, you're doing something wrong. Now, administration may not see that, and they may love you because you're always the best coach on staff. But I think eventually that will get you fired, probably from wins and losses when you quit being able to problem solve as well. And then players, of course, we want to develop players. If we never have a kid go to college ever, no one ever gets that next level. With JUCO, D3, D2, all those options that aren't D1 available to kids, I'm a firm believer in, like, if a kid wants to go to the next level, he can. Someone will take him. So if they're not, it might be a time that you could get fired. And in the program, if you're not leaving it better than you found it, prepare to take a walk, because I know as an administrator, that's what I would be looking for. What are you doing to better the program so the next level or the next group of kids is getting it better than the group you have now? Number 8, not reaching your ceiling or losing too much. I am a very big understander of what does success look like. Every team's level of success is different. Okay, I just came off a team that had won 4 games in 5 years or 3 games in 5 years, and we went 5-5. That was crushing the ceiling. We found that ceiling and punched straight through it, but it wasn't a success for some teams. Coach, you mentioned earlier, you could get fired at 8-2. So find that ceiling, do what you have to do to meet it or break it. But if you lose too much, you will lose your job. Poor handling of parents is my number 7, and I think that works in all kinds of aspects. Sometimes parents have more pull than you know. Sometimes it just begins, it's that thorn in the side of your administration. They're tired of all the phone calls from parents because Bob isn't starting, okay, and they will let you go because I'm tired of fielding phone calls for you. I just want a coach that will just give in a little bit and quit the phone calls. Number 6, mistreat a player, and there's a ton of ways this can happen, and some are way worse than others. We've had deaths in football in the last 5 or 10 years, right, at collegiate levels, okay? And coaches have had to be let go. Maybe it's not death. Maybe it's an injury. Maybe it's not even that. It could be just heat exhaustion. It could be some kids are just different, and when you go to a level 10 on them and you're chewing out for what they're capable of, that's too much. So don't mistreat a player. Number 5, touching the untouchables. We saw that a little bit this past year with, we just wanted to modernize some uniform stuff, and they're like, no, we can't. And it doesn't matter the tradition of the school. The tradition of that school was they'd cut a lot of losses. but their uniform was important to them, so don't touch it. And then, like I said, Bill Blankenship, that's actually the last episode, I think, when we were talking with Coach Nobles. Actually, I think it's after this one. Who knows? I don't know. No one knows. I talked with Bill Blankenship, and he said, when he took his job at Owasso, it was don't touch the horns rams. That's the only thing you can't mess with. Do whatever you want. If you change those rams, you're gone. Like they want the horns. But it could be something different besides uniforms, right? It might be a pregame ceremony that you think is ridiculous. Okay. But if you mess with it, you're gone. So don't touch the untouchables. Politics is my number 4. We've beat up politics a little bit tonight. Just understanding that tact is there and you've got to find a way to get along. Doesn't mean you have to break your morals. If you're doing something wrong to you, leave before you're fired. I don't know. Like if they insist you're doing something incorrect and it's morally wrong, man, it might be time to pop smoke, get out of there. 3, lack of communication. So I have it at 3, Coach, but like I said, it's got fingers and everything, right? If you can't communicate well with those above you and below you, you will quickly find yourself on the hot seat because they want to know. They want to be in the know. And I think about this militarily where it's like the group above me is painting a very large picture. I have a very small piece. It's almost like putting a puzzle together, right? And if they can't complete those pieces, they're going to be quite angry because they have other things. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's booster club. Where's finances go? Where does the budget go? Who should they invite to what game that's a big stakeholder? Because maybe you're going to win this game or lose that. Whatever it is, you got to communicate. And if you keep losing, your staff members, they keep bailing because you won't talk to them. That makes you just as bad as a head coach, right? If they're constantly have to find another guy to fill a teaching slot, especially, look, man, we've changed 3 science teachers in 3 years because you won't talk to your assistant coaches. You find yourself out of there. 2, stepping on others' toes, and I went into that this is me, okay? Number 2 is me, for sure. If you're filling voids and people don't want them filled, they're going to be very, very angry. Regardless if it's all good for the program, good for the kids, if it isn't their idea, sometimes they will be upset because you made them look bad. And my number 1 is lack of tact towards superiors. Like you can get away with a little bit with your subordinates because who are they going to complain to? But if you're constantly kicking the door open to your AD and going off on him because things aren't going your way because it's basketball season and he has a different priority, it shows a lot about your character and you're not going to have that job for long. Same thing with an AD, a superintendent, a principal, a teacher, whatever it is. If you are constantly the issue, you're an argument. Every time I come to talk to you, it's a fight. They're not going to put up with it very long. So I think that is the number 1 way because it stands out the quickest. And there's my top 10. All right, Coach. Well, it's time to close everything out. So if one more time, you could just tell me how to simplify football for my staff and for my athletes.
Sure. So Find a Way Production sponsors the Coaching 101 podcast. It also sponsors offensivecoordinatoracademy.com and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, sites you can go to find everything from a full-blown 20-hour academy to a one-off course to templates to books to anything offense and defense. offensivecoordinatoracademy.com and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com. It also sponsors fbcoachsimpson.com, which houses Headsets, the free magazine, about 3 years worth of issues, all free, all digital, over at fbcoachsimpson.com, as well as the Gun T offense. All things Gun T, the full system, everything you might want to run the Gun T is over there. The same thing with the 3-4 swarm defense. If you're interested in defensive materials, specifically the 3-4, that's over there. We have a lessons learned by a head coach, would fit in really well with this podcast. There's a whole course on that. So that's over there as well. And 32 books ranging from head coaching to planners to gun team materials to 3-4 swarm materials to general coaching knowledge, all over at fbcoachsimpson.com. Also, don't forget to go to fbcoachsimpson.com/podcast to fill out your email to get updates on new episodes, new materials coming out, all things new over at fbcoachsimpson.com/podcast. Also, if you're listening to this podcast on YouTube or on some medium, or maybe hit us up on Twitter, we'd love to hear your top 10 list on ways coaches get fired, and would love to hear from some of our listeners.
Shoot us your experiences. I would say practice that tact. Let's not throw anybody under the bus. But if it was bad enough and you just need to, I'm always good for the nitty gritty. The tea, as they say in high school now, right? We got to sip that tea. All right. So social media, you can find me at Coach Chambo OK on Twitter. You can also email me at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. Chamberlain is the very common spelling of Wilt the Stilt. Coach Simpson, where can we find you?
All things FB Coach Simpson. So FB Coach Simpson is my Twitter handle. fbcoachsimpson@gmail.com is my email address. You can also go into there's a lot of Facebook groups. If you're in Facebook, all those academies, there's a lot of academies. There's a gun tee group. So all those Facebook groups as well.
Perfect. The podcast is at Coaching 101 Pod because podcast is too long apparently. But you can reach out to us there if you want to. You can tag us in any messages. We've received some this week and this week is in the middle of June. I think this thing comes out in like August, so not in August, but in June. We had some communication with the guys that just wanted our input on topics. So that's awesome, man. Keep doing that. Reach out to us any way possible. We want to thank you for being a listener to the Coaching 101 podcast. We hope you'll join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you'll always know when the new episodes are out. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.